Here we go. We are closing the book, the Song of Songs. Today, we have two acts. We have Act 5 and Act 6. Right now, we're in Act 5. We've already started a little bit. This is chapter 6, verse 11 through chapter 8, verse 4. And here we see she finally works the harvest. She has been a very immature bride for the bulk of the story. And here she falls asleep again, but this time when she falls asleep, it's because she's tired from all the hard work she's doing, not from laziness. Okay, so that's huge. Okay, she's going to enter into true rest. So let's begin with chapter 7, verse 1. And we see the shepherd is addressing the Shulamite. And he says, "How beautiful are your feet with shoes." Doesn't want to smell her stinky feet. No. I'm kidding. Okay, so he says, "How beautiful are your feet with shoes, O princess daughter. The joints of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a cunning workman." Well, I think it's interesting when you compare that to Isaiah 52, verse 7 and 8, where it says, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him that brings good tidings." I believe she's finally doing the work. She's finally working the harvest. She's finally got her feet moving on the mountains, not just stuck in the house. It says that publishes salvation. That's Yeshua. That says to Zion, "Your God reigns." And I believe that's something that we need to say to Zion, is your God reigns. The watchmen will lift up their voice. With the voice together they will sing, for they're going to see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring again Zion. Tell you what, look what happened in 1967. Jerusalem, Zion has been brought back, and that's when, in one sense, the Messianic movement really started taking off. And now we go and listen to the shepherd. He again is speaking to the Shulamite. This is verse 2 through 4. "Your navel is like a round goblet, which doesn't want any liquor. Your belly is like a heap of wheat, set about with lilies. Your two breasts are like two young roes that are twins. Your neck is as a tower of ivory. Your eyes are like the fish pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath-rabbim." And then he says, "Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon that looks toward Damascus." Now, how many of you women would love to have someone say, "Your nose looks like the Tower of Lebanon"? I duck because I'd probably get slapped. What in the world? How could the shepherd say such a rude thing to his bride? Actually, let's look at it from a biblical standpoint. And I think this is so important. Let's look at Job 27, verse 1 through 3. "Moreover, Job continued his parable and said, As God lives, who's taken away my judgment, and the Almighty who has vexed my soul, all the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils." Wow! Here I've got a nose like the Tower of Lebanon. But listen to what it says. It says that looks toward Damascus. That's where the enemy. And here Job says, "The Spirit of God is in my nostrils." How many of you ever heard the term, "I smell a rat"? I smell something smells fishy in Denmark. Sorry for those living in Denmark. I'm kidding. But what he's saying here is she has great spiritual discernment. Her nose, she can smell something isn't right. And that's important. And I believe that is what he's saying. Listen to the book of Hebrews, chapter 5, verse 12 through 14. "For when the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that someone teach you again the first principles of the oracles of God. You become such as have need of milk and not strong meat. Everyone that uses milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness. He's a baby. But strong meat belongs to those who are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil." And so I believe what in the Song of Songs, what he's saying is, you've now come to full maturity. throughout this whole paragraph we read. Before, she wasn't mature. Why was she wasn't mature? Because all she could think about is herself. But now she's a marriageable age. You know, it says we have to wait till the fullness of the Gentiles. So many people misunderstand that as the last Gentile to get saved before he comes. No, the fullness of the Gentiles means the maturity of the Gentiles. God's waiting for the Gentiles to grow up, to mature. He wants the church to mature. But too often the church is immature because it's been on milk for the last 2,000 years. Okay, and it's been needing meat. And as it gets meat, then pretty soon it can smell something. How many of you know dogs have pretty good sense of smell? You know, a lot of animals can, that's why they use them at the airport and everywhere else, because they have a good smell. Well, God wants his bride to be able to discern when they smell a rat. Okay. Now, the shepherd continues in verse 5 through 8. Your head is like Carmel, like the Carmel Mountains in Israel that's over there. It says, and the hair of your head is like purple. They dyed their hair back then too. Little purple strands here and there. The king is held captive in the tresses. How fair and how pleasant are you, O lover delights. This your stature is likened to a palm tree, and your breasts are clusters of grapes. And I said, I'll go up to the palm tree, I'll take hold of the boughs. Now also your breasts will be as clusters of vine, and the smell of your nose like what? Well, if you remember, let's go back in the Song of Songs in chapter 2, verse 3. She says to him, like an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. Taste and see the Lord is good. He's the apple tree. That's what this is saying. And now she's partaking of his fruit rather than her own fruit, selfishness, but the fruits of the Spirit that it talks about in Galatians. That's the fruit that she's getting from him as the apple tree. And then it says, back in Song of Songs 2:3, she says, like an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. And now look at this. In chapter 7, verse 9. And the roof of your mouth, like the best wine for my beloved, so she's speaking here, that goes down sweetly, causing the lips of those that are asleep to speak. Isn't that amazing when you go back to the other chapter of Song of Songs where she says, I sleep, but my heart awakes. And that word sleep there meant sleeping like in the dust of the earth. And then he's speaking to her. Remember, he wasn't knocking on the door. He was beating on the door, like doing CPR, trying to wake her up. Well, and it's his voice that caused her to awake. And so here we see the Messiah is the one who causes those who are asleep to speak. And this is talking about the resurrection of the dead. And what do we know? When they hear his voice, what do? They arise and they sing his praises. Now, do you remember earlier in the Song of Songs when she's immature, she goes, my beloved is mine and I am his. Then it switches to, I am my beloved's, and then he is mine. Well, now she matures even more. This time, look what she says in verse 10. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. She doesn't make any claim on him. And I think that is incredible. And then look what she says. This is her talking. And she says, hey, come, my beloved. Let us go forth into the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine flourish. Do you see any difference here? It's not, you go do this. It's not, look at me as I do this. We're a team. We're going to do this together. And now instead of always sleeping all winter, going into hibernation, she's the one who wants to get up early and go work the fields. Let's get to work. Come on. His heart has become her heart. Their heart is one. Now she wants to get going and help. And she wants to see if the vine flourishes. Do you remember Israel is the vine? And if you remember in chapter 1, she goes, my own vineyard I have not kept. I haven't even done that. But now she wants to get going. And she says, I want to see if the pomegranates bud forth. And then look here. There is where I will give you my love. Wow, before she wanted him to come to the house and come to her beck and call. But now she says, no, loving you is doing the work. That's what it is. Working the harvest, doing it. And then it says, the mandrakes give a smell, and at our gates are all manner of pleasant fruits. And notice it says new and old. So it says there's all kinds of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I've laid up for you, oh my beloved. Well, here's what's interesting to me about this new and old. Do you know what that is saying? Look at this. Let's go back to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 19 through 23. The land will yield her fruit, and you will eat until you have enough and dwell there in safety. And if you say, what are we going to eat the 7th year? Behold, we can't sow, we can't gather in or increase. So God says, well, I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce for how many years? Oh my goodness. And you'll sow the 8th year and eat of the produce. The old store until the 9th year, until our produce comes in. You'll eat the old store, and the land will not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, and you are strangers and settlers. God is always for the settlement movement in Israel. But you know what is being said here is she's keeping the Shemitah cycle. She's keeping the Shemitah cycle. Listen to Matthew chapter 13, verse 52. This is from the Hebrew Heritage Bible, the New Testament. It says, so Yeshua told them, for this cause, every scribe who has become a trained disciple of the kingdom of heaven resembles an owner of property who brings out of his treasure storage things what? New and old. Wow. In other words, the Shulamite is adding new, fresh understandings of the kingdom of heaven as well as learning from the older understandings. Okay, you don't throw out the old, you learn from the old, and at the same time, we're to get new, fresh understandings. I mean, it's just like, this is the problem with society today. You throw out the old people. You only want the new kids. But no, God wants, there's something important about both the new, the young, and the old. They all have something to offer. But God is also saying, if you love me, you'll obey me. So now, after that, let's listen to how the Shulamite responds. She says, oh, that you were like my brother, who nursed at my mother's breast. If I should find you outside, I'd kiss you. I would not be despised. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother. She who used to instruct me, I would cause you to drink of spiced wine, of the juice of my pomegranate. And now look at this. Here it is again. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. So she's laying down. She's the one that's going to go to sleep again. But this time, it's a good thing. Let's see. It says, she who used to instruct me. Who used to instruct her? Her mother. Isn't that what it says? Well, look at this. Proverbs 1, 8 and 9. My son, hear the instruction of your father. Don't forsake the Torah of your mother, because that's what's to be a crown of grace on your head and chains about your neck. So the Torah becomes your crown. The Torah becomes a beautiful necklace. As a matter of fact, we see that in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 11, God says to Israel, and I decked you with ornaments. I put bracelets upon your hands and a chain upon your neck. When he says he put a chain upon your neck and a crown on your head, those are both referring to the Torah. He graced them with Torah. I think the biggest problem with much of Christianity, they don't see the Torah as a beautiful chain upon their neck. They see it as a tire chain. Okay? But that's because they don't understand. Listen to Psalm 73. This is verse 2 through 6. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. Look at this. It's because I was envious of the arrogant. When I saw the prosperity of the wicked, they have no pangs until they die. Their bodies are fat and sleek. They're not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Therefore, pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. So what necklace are we wearing? Are we wearing a necklace of Torah or a necklace of pride and arrogance? And then in Psalm 73, 16 through 19, it says, but when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God and I discerned. There's that Tower of Lebanon. I discern their end. Truly you set them in slippery places. You make them fall to ruin. How they are destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors. This is why we got to have discernment in these last days. There are things, I'm telling you, that I think are going to be happening, and we have to discern which way do we go. We have to have seeing eyes, ears to hear, hearts to understand. And then, as I said, she just fell asleep. And again, the same way the shepherd responds, and he's speaking to the daughters of Jerusalem, and he says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, how you stir up and how you wake my love until she pleases. So she's asleep again. But this time, like I said, it's from all of the hard work. Now, on this picture, going back, I have the smell of your nose is like apples. Well, if the smell of her nose is like apples, it's because she's been eating apples. Okay, and that means she's been under the apple tree, which refers to the Messiah. Okay, so here we go. The final Act 6, the last verses of this song, chapter 8, verse 5 through verse 14. And now, here's the big difference. She no longer is thinking about herself. You're going to see now her concern is for others. Oh my goodness. You know, the truly strong people, it's not all about me. If you're really strong, you have confidence and you know, okay, what can I do for others? How can I help others? It's weak people who always think it's all about them. Okay? Just like if you're really weak and you want to shake someone's hand, you try to do it real strong to show how strong you are. But if you're really strong, you're very gentle and you want to be careful because you know you'll crush their hand. And so the strong people don't have to come across strong, they just are strong. You following me? Okay, now, here we go. The Shulamite in this chapter now enjoys full communion with the shepherd, totally sanctified, and you'll find she has ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the bride. And so if you remember a couple of weeks ago, the daughters of Jerusalem were commenting, who is this coming up out of the wilderness? Okay, like smoking mad. And who was it? It was Solomon that was smoking mad coming out of the wilderness. Here he is in the middle of the night with his bed looking for prey. But now what does the daughters of Jerusalem see? Oh my goodness. In chapter 8, verse 5, who is this coming up from the wilderness now? Oh, and she's leaning upon her beloved. Now it's the shepherd and the Shulamite. And I think it's interesting. In the wilderness, Bamidbar. Okay, in the wilderness is where you'll find the true companionship. Listen to Ezekiel. This is chapter 34, verse 23 through 25. God says, I will set up one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them. Even my servant David, he'll feed them. And he will be their shepherd, and I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David, prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will make them a covenant of peace. What does that remind us of? Phineas. And not only that, this proves the resurrection of the dead, because Ezekiel is 500 years after David, and God says David is going to be raised up to be their prince. And it says, for I, the Lord, have spoken, I'll make him a covenant of peace. I'm going to cause the evil beast to cease out of the land. And that often refers to the nations, just like the beasts in Revelation and things. And so he's going to cause the evil beast to cease out of the land. And it says, they shall dwell safely in the wilderness. And what else are they going to do? Sleep in the woods. And here she is, asleep in the woods, coming out of the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved. And then look at Ezekiel 34. It goes on in verse 26 through 31. It says, I'm going to make them and the places all around my hill a blessing. And God says, I'm going to cause showers to come down in their season. In other words, at the appropriate time. There will be showers of blessing, and then the trees of the field will yield their fruit. The earth will yield her increase, and they will be safe in their land. We know that has not happened since Israel's become a nation in 1948. The last thing they felt is safe in their land. This is a promise that's coming. And it says, and they will know that I am the Lord when I've broken the bands of their yoke, delivered them from the hand of those who enslaved them, and they'll no longer be a prey for the nations. Nor will beasts of the land devour them, but they shall dwell safely. No one will make them afraid. I'll raise up for them a garden of renown, and they will no longer be consumed with hunger in the land. Look at this, nor bear the shame of the Gentiles anymore. Thus they'll know that I, the Lord their God, am with them, and they, the Baptists, the Catholics, they, the house of Israel, are my people, says the Lord God. You are my flock, the flock of my pasture. You are men, and I am your God, says the Lord God. In other words, the whole world is going to know the Jewish people are the people of God at this time. How many of you know David was Jewish? He's from the tribe of Judah. Okay. Listen to Hosea chapter 2, verse 14 and 15. Therefore, behold, I will allure her. That's his bride. And where's he going to bring her? Into the wilderness. And I'm going to speak tenderly to her. And there I will give her her vineyards and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And there she shall answer as in the days of her youth, as at the time when she came out of the land of Egypt. That's just so beautiful, because when you also read in Ezekiel, God says, look, when I brought you out of Egypt, you were just a little kid, and I had to clean you up and swaddle you and take care of you. And it goes back to Revelation, where we lost our first love. God is saying that Israel is going to come back to her first love. And that's what the Song of Songs is all about. God's trying to woo her away from a natural king like King Solomon. Who could be greater than King Solomon? So the greatest human king Israel's ever had was horrible. And so God says, I'm trying to woo you away from a human king back to me as your shepherd king. And this is what finally happens. And then look at the shepherd, what he says to the Shulamite in 8, the second half of 5. I awoke you, and where were you? Under the apple tree. That's the Messiah. And there your mother travailed with you, and there she travailed and bore you. Well, let's come back again to the birth of Jerusalem. Here it is. This is what I was telling you about in Ezekiel 16, 4 through 8. As for your nativity on the day you were born, your navel cord was not cut. You weren't washed in water to cleanse you. You were not rubbed with salt. You weren't wrapped in swaddling clothes. No one pitied you to do any of these things for you, to have compassion on you, but you were thrown out into the open field. You hear about babies being thrown in the trash. And here God says that's what Jerusalem was. They were just thrown out into the open field. When you yourself were loathed on the day you were born, your mother didn't want you, your father didn't want you. And then God says, when I passed by you and I saw you struggling there in your own blood, I said to you in your blood, Chai Yisrael, live. Yes, I said to you while you're in your blood, live. And I made you to thrive like a plant in the field, and you grew, matured, and became very beautiful. Your breasts were formed, your hair grew, but you were naked and bare. When I passed by you again and looked upon you, indeed, your time was the time of love, so I spread my wing over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you, and you became mine, says the Lord God. Wow. Again, the God of Israel cries out to the Jewish people, live, Am Yisrael Chai. And that's the Song of Songs. He's finally reached, he was there at her birth, and then he comes back when she's mature and says, live, and enters a covenant with her. That's what the Song of Songs is about. She finally reaches maturity. She's no longer self-centered. And so now the shepherd urges the Shulamite in a call to action. Look at verse 6 and 7 of chapter 8. He says to her, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. I can't help but think of tefillin. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy is cruel as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, a most vehement flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. If a man would give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. Money cannot buy love. So often people think money can buy love. If I just, throw some money at it, they'll love me. I tell you what, it does not work that way. This is why we have the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. It says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words I command you today shall be where? In your heart, and teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them. How can you forget God if you're talking about him every day? The only way you can forget God in your life is if you don't talk about him. And it says, when you lie down, when you rise, bind them as a sign on your hand. They'll be as frontlets between your eyes. Write them on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. Why do you think God commanded the Shema? Why do you think he said to love the Lord your God with all your heart and love his commandments and teach them? Why do you think, it's really important to know the reason why on a lot of things. He tells you the reason why in the next verses, and we don't connect the dots. Look at the very next verses. He tells you why it's so important for us to understand the Shema. It says, so it'll be, this is verse 10 through 15, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities, which you had nothing to do with, and the houses full of good things, which you had nothing to do with, hewn out wells, which you had nothing to do with, vineyards and olive trees, which you didn't plant. And then when you've eaten and are full, beware lest you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. Fear the Lord your God and serve him. They say the best way to replace a habit is to create a new habit. Oftentimes, if you get rid of something, there's a void and anything rushes in to fill it. Just like I remember in the Gospels, the parable of the demons being cast out, and then it's come back and it's all swept and garnished if it's still empty. That's why when you get rid of the things in your life you need to get rid of, you can't have a void. You got to fill it. You got to fill it. And it says, don't go after other gods, the gods of the nations who are around you, for the Lord your God is jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord your God is aroused against you and destroy you from off the face of the earth. So, in other words, God is a jealous God. He wants you. He created you. He saved you. He delivered you. How could we ever go anywhere else but back to him? But the problem is, this is a problem. America has been one of the most prosperous nations in all of history. And look where it's at today. It's because they've forgotten God. Back in the 70s, they took prayer out of schools. Everything going on. America's been downhill since the 70s, big time. So here now, again, the Shulamite has finally matured. She's no longer thinking about herself. And she says in verse 8, and no, it's not I have a little sister. It's we have a little sister. She has no breast. What are we going to do for our sister in the day when she's spoken for? In other words, she's not of marriageable age yet. And she wants to know how her little sister should be preparing so when she comes of marriageable age, she'll be ready. Now, the Shulamite is secure enough and mature enough now that she can think about others. So how does the shepherd respond? He responds by this. In verse 9, I have a little picture here. She can be a wall. If she's a wall, then we'll build upon her a battlement of silver. But if she is a door going back and forth, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. Okay, so what does it mean if she is a wall right now? Well, actually, we find that out in the book of Samuel. Listen to 1 Samuel 25, verse 15 and 16. It says, "But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them. And when we were in the fields, they were" what? "They were a wall to us, night and day, all the time we were with them keeping the sheep." In other words, this wall is a wall of protection. A wall is something that is solid. And so they're saying that if she's a wall, if she's strong and she's permanent, she's rooted and grounded, hey, we'll build battlements on there. But if she goes to and fro, if she's tossed to and fro, we need to enclose her with cedar. Look at Proverbs 26, verse 14. It says, "Just as a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man on his bed." Well, this was the Shulamite at the very beginning. She just never got out of bed. She just told him to go on his way, went back. Well, now she's finally matured. Okay? And so what does... I have here the shepherd is saying, we have to think about this. He's saying, well, if she's a wall, we'll do this. If she's a door, we'll do this. What he's saying is every one of us are different. And this is why you have to treat everyone separately. Let me see. I think when it comes to a shepherd, and when it comes to training, we have to support each person differently depending on what condition they're in. Not everyone is in the same condition. Not everyone's in the same place. This is a big problem with people who are zealous for God. They will take someone who is on a path here, and they're clear up here, and they'll expect them to walk where they're at. And they're judgmental. Why aren't you doing this? Oh, you're doing that. Oh, you're doing that. No, you don't get mad at your first grader when they don't paint like Leonardo da Vinci. You encourage them where they're at. And this is what is so important. We have to treat and I think this is what this book is saying is, I mean, a lot of people in the Messianic movement will get all over Christians' cases and, oh, you don't do Sunday, you do Sunday, oh, you don't do Saturday. Who gives a rep? I'm serious. At the temple, they had to go every day. Every day is a good day to worship. That doesn't make every day the Sabbath. But why can't we look at the positive and say, great, you can go to church on Sunday. Nothing wrong with it. Hey, it'd be a good idea to rest on Saturday, But so many people in the Messianic movement are still immature as well. Yes. They really are. They're acting like a bunch of babies. They love to argue with Christians, and they just burn bridges like you would not believe. It stinks. Stinky feet. They need to put on shoes. Okay, but again, those are weak people. People that are strong, they're not throwing mud, burning bridges and throwing bombs. Okay, I'll give you a good example how every situation can be treated differently. I can't believe when I was just a little kid and I'm trying to build my own little wooden box or something like that, and do you use hammers or screwdrivers, nails or screws? And I had a screw, and for me, I am not a carpenter, okay? If I'm going to screw something in, I have the Phillips screw where it's all jagged, and I can do the screwdriver, and it just spins. I mean, that's just the way it is for me, And I'm trying to get this screw in, and my brother, who's 5 years older, comes over to me and sees I'm having trouble with the screw. So he goes, "You don't use a screwdriver for those, uses a hammer." He goes, boom, boom, and he just pounded the screw in. Heck, man, worked with the hammer, but you're supposed to use the screwdriver. So you have to use the right tool. Okay, now, here we go. And look at how she responds. She says, I'm a wall. I'm finally grown up. I'm no longer a door being tossed to and fro. I'm now a wall. My breasts are like towers. And it says, then I became in his eyes as one who found peace. Tell you what, she had no peace within herself until that point. She was in constant turmoil. Who am I? Where am I? But now that she's finally matured, she's at peace with herself, and she's like a wall, which reminds me of 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing your labor is not in vain in the Lord. She's finally doing the work of the Lord. So now that she's rooted and grounded and she's doing the work, she can feel like she's fully mature, and now she's able to feed many young. That's the other thing. Now she can feed others. And then where does that bring us to verse 11 and 12? Look what she says. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He leased the vineyard to keepers. Everyone was to bring for its fruit 1,000 silver coins. And then she says, my own vineyard is before me. Think about this. My own vineyard. I'm not leasing from Solomon. This is my own vineyard. And then she says, you, O Solomon, you can have 1,000 vineyards, and those who tend its fruit, 200. But guess what? She don't care. She has her own vineyard now. Here we see King Solomon back in the picture, being sure to tax everyone as well, believing all the fields belong to him. Samuel had warned Israel of a Solomon king. Listen to 1 Samuel 8:14 through 17. He says, he's going to take the best of your fields, your vineyards, your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He'll take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and servants. He's going to take your male servants, your female servants, your finest young men, your donkeys, and put them to his work. He's going to take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. So the Shulamite makes the comment indirectly to Solomon that he may have 1,000 vineyards, but the one she has is all hers, and he can't touch it. Nah, can't touch this. And then look at what the shepherd reminds the Shulamite of. He's speaking to his love, the bride, and he says, you who dwell in the gardens, the companions listen for your voice. Let me hear it. God wants to hear from his bride. The shepherd wants to hear. He says, everybody gets to hear your voice. I want to hear your voice. Do you remember back in chapter 2, verse 14, when he first came to her and she was totally consumed with herself? And he says, oh, my dove in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the cliff, let me see your face. I want to hear your voice. Your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. But what is she doing? She's hiding from him because she doesn't want to go out and work. He was calling for her. I want to hear your voice. And she was quiet, hiding behind the stairs. And when she finally speaks, he says, go take a hike, honey. When he says he wants to hear her voice, and he speaks about she's in the garden, I can't help but think of the Garden of Eden when God was calling out to Adam and Eve, wanting to hear their voice. This whole thing takes us back to the beginning. And listen to what the Shulamite says this time. Instead of telling him to take a hike, she says, make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountain of spices. Not the mountain of Bether, a wall of separation, but the mountain of spices. The mountain of spices refers to Mount Moriah, where the shepherd will lay down his life for his bride. Micah 4:2, many nations will come and say, let us go up to that mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He'll teach us his ways. We'll walk in his paths, for out of Zion the law will go forth and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And so we see the Song of Songs at the very beginning. She doesn't know anything about him, where he works, where he lives. But at the very end, just like at the very beginning, Solomon is in the picture, but she's trying to get away from Solomon. And at the very end, we see Solomon appearing again. And there he is, just wanting to tax everybody like a human king would do, wanting to take everything for himself. But she's now mature enough, and she wants to have the shepherd go to the mountain of spices where he will lay down his life, but she's willing to go with him. and lay down her life for him. So let us all gain new revelation and be prepared for the prophetic time that's coming in these last days when all of us will go together to Jerusalem. Who wants to go?